Hi, REM 230. Welcome to our reading lesson. Last week, I introduced to you to the idea of thinking about what is the lesson or the moral of a story when you are reading a folk tale or a fairy tale. So let's remember what we talked about last week. Last week, I was explaining that a folk tale or a fairy tale usually has a hero to it, has some magic in it, probably has some talking animals as well. There's often a princess or somebody who needs help. And then there's a villain or what we might call a bad guy. But the thing that all fairy tales and folk tales have that are the same is that they all have a moral or a lesson to be learned. The moral of the story or the lesson to be learned is what the author wants you to learn from hearing that story. So last week, I read to you a book called Me First, and it was about a very greedy pig named Pinkerton. And he got tricked by the sand witch, if you remember. He thought he was going to get to eat a sandwich. It turns out he had to take care of a witch who lived in the sand. So he realized that being first all the time isn't always best. So that's the lesson we learned from that story, too. We can learn from Pinkerton and think to ourselves, okay, it's not always good to be first. Sometimes you should let other people go in front of you. So the moral of the story is it's not always best to be first. So we're going to keep thinking about moral and lessons in the fairy tales that we read, but we're also going to start thinking about something else. We're also going to start thinking about how there's lots of different versions of the same story. These stories are so old. They've been told over and over and over again. They've been around for hundreds of years. And every time they get told a little bit different. Sometimes they get told a lot different. So today I'm going to read you a folk tale that you probably already know. And I found a version of it that's very straightforward. It's the way most people have heard it. It's pretty much the way you would expect it to be. And then next week, I'm going to read you a different version of it. And we're going to start thinking about how are they different and how are they same. So we're actually going to be kind of doing two things at the same time. We're going to be thinking, what is the moral of the story? And how is this story different? How is it the same from other versions of the same story? So the story that I picked out for us today is The Three Little Pigs. And I bet you already know the story of the Three Little Pigs. Will you turn and tell the person next to you, what is something you already know that happens in the story, The Three Little Pigs? Okay. Yes, The Three Little Pigs is about three little pigs, right? And there's also a wolf. There is usually a wolf in folk tales. You'll notice once you start reading a lot of folk tales, you'll notice there's a lot of wolves in these stories. In fact, with one of my small groups last week, we read the folk tale, The Boy Who Cried Wolf. So wolves are often the bad guys in folk tales. So let's read this story. And while I'm reading it, I want you thinking to yourself, what is the lesson or the moral of this story? The Three Little Pigs, retold by Kath Jewett and illustrated by Mai Matsukawa. Once upon a time, there were three little pigs who lived in a cozy cottage on the hill. They loved to eat all the delicious food their mother made them every day. They ate so much that it wasn't long before the three little pigs had grown so big that there was no room for them in the cozy cottage anymore. "I'm sorry," said their mother one morning, "but it's time you made your own way in the world." So mom is telling the three pigs, you guys are big now, you're all grown up, it's time to go live on your own. So the very next day, the three little pigs left home. "Don't forget to watch out for the big bad wolf," called their mother as she waved goodbye. "He'll eat you for supper, so you'll need to build a big, fine, strong house as quickly as you can to keep him away." "Don't worry, Ma," they oinked. "We can look after ourselves." And the three little pigs trotted off down the hill, each taking a different path. So the mother pig had some advice for her children. Make sure you build a strong house to keep away the big bad wolf. And they said, "We got it, Mom. No worries." It wasn't long before the first little pig met a farmer pulling a cart filled with straw. "Please, may I Please, may I buy some straw to build a house? Asked the little pig. Of course, replied the farmer, but a straw house won't be very strong. But the little pig didn't listen. Soon he was busy stacking the bundles of straw for his new house. Okay, let's stop and think, because remember, what are we thinking about while we listen to the story? What is the moral or the lesson of the story? So I'm thinking, Mom said, build a strong house. And the pig asks the farmer to buy straw. And what does the farmer say to him? This won't build a strong house. But what does he do? He decides to do it anyways. And you're thinking to yourself, this isn't a good idea. No, not a good idea. In no time at all, the house of straw was finished, and the little pig went inside for a nap. He had just shut his eyes when there was a knock at the door. It was the big bad wolf, and he was hungry. Little pig, let me in, growled the wolf. No, cried the little pig, not by the hair on my chinny chin chin. Then I'll huff, and I'll puff, and I'll blow your house down, laughed the wolf. And that's just what he did. Huff, puff, whoosh. So that farmer was right. The straw did not make a strong house. In fact, it was such a bad house that wolf could blow it down. Meanwhile, the second little pig was walking along the road when he saw a woodcutter piling up sticks. Please, may I buy some sticks? He asked politely. I want to build a house. Of course, answered the woodcutter, but a house made of sticks will soon fall down. But the second little pig wasn't listening. He was much too busy planning his new stick home. Stopping and thinking, I'm noticing a theme. The first little pig, he was not listening, and what happened? His house got blown down by the wolf. Second little pig, he's not listening. What do we think is going to happen? Yeah, probably his house is probably going to get blown down. Are we starting to sense what the moral of the story is here, or what is the lesson we're supposed to learn? Yes, I agree. All right, let's read and see if we're right. Soon the house was finished. The little pig had just sat down to rest when there was a knock at the door. It was the big bad wolf. He was even hungrier now. Little pig, let me in, he growled. No way, not by the hair on my chinny chin chin, cried the second little pig. Then I'll huff, and I'll puff, and I'll blow your house down, cried the wolf. And that's exactly what he did. Huff, puff, whoosh. Oh dear. Well, unfortunately, we were right. Little pig made a house out of sticks. Even though he was told it was not a good idea, he did it anyways. And what happened? Yes, his house fell down. Meanwhile, the third little pig had met a builder. Please, may I buy some of your bricks to build my house? He asked. Of course, replied the builder. A fine, strong house of bricks will last forever. This seems different than what we heard last time. This person is saying this is a good idea. That's good to know. The third little pig took the builder's advice. He would build the strongest house in the land. Finally, after a hard day's work, the house was finished. It had 4 strong walls of brick, a tiled roof, a sturdy wooden door, and a large fireplace with a chimney. Now we can tell by looking that this house is going to be very different. Do you guys think that the wolf is going to have any luck with this house? I'm thinking not. The third little pig had just put a pot of turnips on the fire to boil when he saw his brothers running down the road, closely followed by the big bad wolf. Quick, cried the third little pig, hide in here. The wolf, who was very hungry by now, banged on the sturdy front door. Little pigs, let me in, he growled, his tummy rumbling very loud with hunger. No way, not by the hairs on our chinny chin chins, cried the 3 little pigs. Then I'll huff, and I'll puff, and I'll blow your house down, laughed the wolf. So he huffed, and he puffed, and he puffed, and he huffed, but the brick house stood firm. The wolf was furious. He climbed up onto the roof and shouted down the chimney, "If I can't blow your house down, I'll come down the chimney and gobble you all up." The big bad wolf jumped and landed with a huge splash in the pot of turnips boiling on the fire below. Yow! He leaped up with a scream and ran out of the house, never to be seen again. And the three little pigs lived happily ever after in the house made of bricks. The end. All right. So we were thinking, what was the lesson or the moral of that story? What did the three little pigs learn? And what are we supposed to learn from that story? So let's go back to our whiteboard and think about what we were doing. We know that all fairy tales and folk tales have a moral or a lesson. And we can read a folk tale and understand the lesson or the moral of the story. The lesson or the moral, this basically means the same thing. Sometimes you hear people use that word moral of the story, and that just means what were you supposed to learn from that story? And that's what lesson means too. So what was the lesson or the moral of this story? What is it we are supposed to learn? And what did the pigs learn from this story? I learned that, will you finish that sentence and tell it to the person you're sitting next to, please? What did you learn from this story? Yeah, I'm hearing a lot of you say that you learned that it's good to listen to people when they give you advice. I learned that it's a good idea to listen to people's advice. Their mom told them to build a strong house. The farmer told them to build a strong house. The woodcutter told them to build a strong house. The builder told them to build a strong house. And only one of the pigs listened to the advice. And the other pigs, their houses got blown down. So we can say, you know what? It seems like it's a good idea to listen to people's advice. So that is the moral of the story. I learned that it's a good idea to listen to people's advice. Okay, so we're going to read another version of The Three Little Pigs next week. And then next week, we're going to compare and contrast. We're going to notice what is the same and what is different. But we're also still going to keep thinking, what is the moral of this story? That's also what we're going to do this week during our small groups. So let's remember, what do we do for reading during the week? Every day you read either on Raz Kids or on Epic, and both of those have a lot of fairy tales and folk tales. So I hope you'll be looking for fairy tales and folk tales on those websites. And you are reading for how many minutes? 30 minutes a day, and you write it down in your reading log. You send me your reading log and you will be a homework superstar, and you will get your name announced at the class meeting. So your homework for reading is always to do reading 30 minutes a day. And then, of course, you're going to come to small group. I can't wait to see you then. And we'll read a different folktale. We won't read Three Little Pigs. I'll find something different for us to read. Okay. Until then, I will see you later. Bye-bye.